Welcome back to Godless and Grounded. If you look around the world today, it's hard not to notice something changing in the way people think about religion. For centuries, religious belief was almost an automatic part of life. You were born into a faith, you grew up practicing it, and questioning it wasn't really an option, at least not without facing serious consequences. But now, more and more people are walking away from religion entirely, calling themselves atheists, agnostics, or simply non-religious. This is not happening in just one country or culture, it's a global trend. And it's worth asking, why is atheism rising all over the world? The reasons are many, and they touch on education, technology, politics, social changes, and even psychology. One of the most obvious reasons is access to information. In the past, people often learned about the world only through local traditions, religious leaders, or family members. Today, with the internet, anyone can explore different viewpoints, scientific discoveries, and historical facts from anywhere in the world. A person who might have once only heard the teachings of their own religion can now read about dozens of others, see how they contradict each other, and compare those claims to what science says. It's much harder to keep people in a bubble when information flows so freely. The internet has made it almost impossible for religious authorities to control what people know. And once you see that different religions make completely different claims about the universe, yet all insist they are the one truth, it becomes easier to question whether any of them are actually true. Education plays a huge role as well. Studies from many countries show a clear pattern. The more access people have to quality education, the less religious they tend to be. That's not because education is anti-religion, but because it encourages critical thinking, teaches people to evaluate evidence, and exposes them to scientific explanations for natural events. 1,000 years ago, people might have explained lightning as a punishment from the gods. Today, even school children can explain it in terms of electricity and weather patterns. The more people learn, the less they feel the need to rely on supernatural explanations. And when you remove the need for supernatural explanations, belief in gods starts to fade naturally. Another factor is the rapid pace of scientific and technological progress. Think about it. Our ancestors had no idea about germs, the Big Bang, evolution, or DNA. They explained disease, creation, and life itself through religious stories because that's all they had. Now, we have evidence-based answers to questions that were once thought to belong only to religion. Evolution explains the diversity of life without invoking a creator. Cosmology explains how the universe could begin without needing a divine spark. Medicine has replaced faith healing. Weather forecasting has replaced rain dances. With each scientific advancement, the God of the gaps has fewer and fewer gaps to hide in. There's also the issue of religious hypocrisy and scandals. Around the world, we've seen countless examples of religious leaders, people who are supposed to be moral guides, being caught in corruption, abuse, or outright crimes. These incidents have broken the trust that many people once placed in religious institutions. And when you see that those who preach virtue often fail to live by it, you start to wonder whether the belief system itself is worth following. The Catholic Church's abuse scandals, extremist violence committed in the name of religion, and political manipulation by religious groups all feed into this growing skepticism. Cultural diversity and globalization have had a big impact too. In the past, you might have grown up in a village where everyone believed the same thing, and it seemed obvious that your faith was the only truth. Now, cities and even small towns are more diverse. You might live next door to someone who practices a different religion, or none at all. This makes it much harder to believe that your own religion is the only correct one when you see other good, moral people living happy lives with completely different beliefs. The more we interact with people from different backgrounds, the less convincing religious exclusivity becomes. Another reason atheism is rising is the growing acceptance of questioning and doubt. In many societies, it's becoming safer to say, "I don't believe." 50 years ago, admitting you were an atheist could destroy your career, your social life, or even your family relationships in some places. In some countries, it still can. But in much of the world, attitudes are changing. Public figures, scientists, and even celebrities openly discuss their lack of belief. Online communities give support to people who feel alone in their doubts. This creates a snowball effect. When one person speaks up, it gives others the courage to do the same. Social progress also plays a role. Many younger people see religion as an obstacle to issues they care about. Gender equality, LGBTQ+ rights, freedom of expression, and separation of church and state. When they see religious doctrines used to justify discrimination or slow down social change, they start to question whether religion is a force for good in modern society. If your values are based on equality and human rights, it's hard to reconcile them with holy books or traditions that treat some people as less worthy because of gender, sexuality, or beliefs. Psychology is another angle. People have started to understand the human brain better. We know now that we're prone to cognitive biases, mental shortcuts that can make us believe things without good evidence. Once you realize that humans are naturally wired to see patterns, even where none exist, or to connect unrelated events into a story, it's easier to see how religions could have been created and sustained by human minds rather than divine intervention. When you combine this understanding with modern skepticism, you get a mindset that values evidence over faith. Another interesting reason atheism is rising is that life has become in many ways more secure. In countries where people have stable governments, good healthcare, and reliable food supplies, religion tends to be less important. In contrast, in places where life is harsh, unpredictable, and full of danger, religion offers comfort and a sense of control. This is why you often see higher levels of atheism in wealthy, stable countries like Sweden, Japan, or the Netherlands. People there don't need to pray for rain or healing as often because they trust science, technology, and social systems to handle those needs. When survival doesn't depend on divine help, the appeal of religion decreases. The generational shift is perhaps the most powerful driver of all. Young people are growing up in a completely different environment than their grandparents. They're surrounded by technology, global culture, and instant access to knowledge. They've seen that morality doesn't require religion. Goodness comes from empathy, cooperation, and fairness, not from fear of divine punishment. And when they see religious beliefs being used to divide people or slow down progress, they're less inclined to accept those beliefs without question. Every new generation that grows up without strong religious indoctrination adds to the momentum of secularism. And then there's the role of history. We now have access to historical research showing how religions formed, evolved, and sometimes borrowed from older myths. Many of the unique stories in one religion turn out to be versions of even older stories from another culture. When people learn that their sacred text contains elements that existed in earlier religions, it can shake the belief that it came directly from a god. Historical evidence often paints a picture of religion as a human invention, shaped by politics, culture, and social needs rather than divine revelation. Atheism's rise isn't just about rejecting gods, it's about replacing faith with something else: reason, evidence, and personal responsibility. People are realizing they can live meaningful, moral, and fulfilling lives without relying on supernatural beliefs. This realization, once rare, is now spreading faster than ever. It's a cultural shift, a change in human consciousness, driven by a combination of knowledge, connection, and the courage to question. And perhaps the most important part is this: atheism is no longer seen as a dark, empty place without hope. Many people now view it as a liberating perspective that allows you to see the world as it truly is, without filters or ancient rules. It's about taking ownership of your own life, making decisions based on reality rather than tradition, and finding meaning in the here and now instead of waiting for an afterlife. When you put all these factors together, education, science, globalization, social progress, historical understanding, psychological awareness, and generational change, it's no surprise that atheism is rising globally. The world is more connected, informed, and open than ever before, and once people see they can live happily without religious belief, the idea spreads. Atheism's growth is not a sudden rebellion. It's the natural outcome of a world where truth is easier to find and where people are freer to choose their own path. The question now is not whether atheism will continue to rise, but how much it will reshape the future of human society. If you look around the world today, something is shifting in the way people think about belief. For most of human history, religion was not just common, it was almost unavoidable. You were born into it, surrounded by it, taught it from the earliest moments of childhood. It shaped laws, customs, morals, and even the way people understood the stars. Questioning it openly could cost you friends, your job, or even your life. But something different is happening now. More people than ever are stepping away from religious belief altogether, calling themselves atheists, agnostics, secular humanists, or simply non-religious. This isn't happening in one small corner of the globe, it's a worldwide trend. And the question is, why? Why is atheism rising at a pace that would have been unthinkable just a century ago? One of the biggest reasons is the revolution in access to information. A few decades ago, most people got their knowledge from local schools, family traditions, and religious institutions. The information they received often reinforced the beliefs of the community. But the internet has made it possible for almost anyone to learn about the full spectrum of human ideas. A teenager in a small conservative town can now watch debates between scientists and theologians, read ancient religious texts alongside modern criticism, or learn about cultures that live happily without any concept of a god. This free flow of information means religious authorities no longer have the same monopoly over what people hear. If one belief system claims it is the only truth, it's now easy to check what other belief systems say, and see that they make equally absolute but contradictory claims. Education plays a huge role as well. Worldwide studies show that the higher the level of education, the less likely someone is to hold strong religious beliefs. This isn't because education directly tells people there is no God, but because it trains people to evaluate evidence, spot logical inconsistencies, and think critically. 1,000 years ago, lightning might have been explained as divine punishment. Today, even a primary school student can explain it using electricity, weather patterns, and the laws of physics. In ancient times, a plague might be seen as the anger of the gods. Now we know it's caused by bacteria or viruses. As people learn more about how the natural world works, the need to invoke supernatural explanations declines. And then there's science itself, the single greatest rival to religious explanations. Every scientific breakthrough chips away at the unknown territory where gods once lived. Evolution showed that life's diversity can be explained without a designer. Astronomy revealed that Earth is not the center of the universe, but just one planet among billions. Medical science has replaced faith healing for most people. Weather forecasting replaced rituals for rain. With each discovery, the God of the gaps has fewer and fewer places to hide. It's telling that many religious explanations for natural phenomena haven't changed for thousands of years, while science updates and corrects itself constantly, because that's how progress works. But it's not just knowledge and science that are pushing people toward atheism. It's also the behavior of religion itself. Around the world, high-profile religious scandals have damaged trust. From sexual abuse cases in the Catholic Church to extremist violence committed in the name of Islam, from televangelists caught in financial fraud to leaders using religion for political manipulation, the gap between religious teachings and religious practice has never been more visible. When leaders who claim divine guidance are exposed as corrupt or abusive, it plants doubt, not just in the leader, but in the entire institution. Cultural diversity is another quiet but powerful factor. A few centuries ago, most people lived their entire lives surrounded by others who believed the same way. Now, thanks to migration and globalization, you might live next door to someone who practices a completely different religion, or no religion at all. Seeing that your neighbor, who doesn't share your beliefs, is just as moral, kind, and trustworthy as you, forces you to ask, if my religion were the only true path, why are so many outsiders living good lives without it? The generational shift is even more dramatic. Younger generations are less religious than their parents and grandparents. They've grown up in a world with instant access to global perspectives, where secular values like gender equality and LGBTQ+ rights are discussed openly. They see religion not just as a belief system, but as an institution that often resists social progress. When religious leaders oppose equal rights or science education, young people notice. And when they realize that morality can be based on empathy, fairness, and cooperation, without needing divine reward or punishment, they feel less reason to cling to traditional faith. Psychology adds another layer to the story. We now understand that humans are naturally prone to certain cognitive biases. We see patterns even where none exist. We connect unrelated events into a story. We trust authority figures even when we shouldn't. These mental shortcuts were useful for survival in the past, but they also make us vulnerable to believing myths. Once people become aware of these mental habits, they can question whether their beliefs are truly based on evidence or just the product of an evolved brain trying to make sense of the world. Another reason atheism is spreading is tied to quality of life. In countries with high levels of safety, stability, and prosperity, like Sweden, Denmark, Japan, and the Netherlands, religion tends to be less important. When you can rely on healthcare instead of faith healing, on social services instead of charity, and on science instead of miracles, religion loses some of its practical role. In contrast, in poorer or less stable countries, religion still offers hope and comfort in the face of uncertainty. But as living conditions improve, reliance on divine intervention naturally fades. Global travel and migration also break down religious walls. Imagine someone raised in a devoutly religious society moving to a more secular country. They might find that life without constant religious rituals feels freer, not emptier. They may see that morality and happiness don't require constant reference to a God. That experience can be transformative, and it often spreads through conversations and shared stories. History itself is another powerful force behind atheism's growth. Modern scholarship shows that many religious traditions are built on older myths, reused stories, and cultural borrowings. When someone learns that their sacred text contains versions of older tales from neighboring civilizations, the claim of divine originality becomes harder to accept. Historical evidence often points not to divine revelation, but to human invention, shaped by politics, economics, and the needs of the time. And perhaps most importantly, atheism is no longer seen as a lonely, hopeless position. For many people, it's the opposite. It's freeing. Without the constraints of ancient rules, you can shape your own moral code based on reason and compassion. Without the fear of divine punishment, you can act out of genuine care for others rather than fear. Without the promise of an afterlife, you may value this life even more because you see it as your one and only chance to experience the world. Put all of these factors together: education, science, scandals, cultural diversity, generational change, psychology, prosperity, migration, history, and the global rise of atheism is not surprising. It's not a sudden rebellion. It's the natural result of a world where knowledge is accessible, where ideas compete openly, and where people feel increasingly free to think for themselves. The more the world opens up, the more people realize they can live full, meaningful lives without religion. The question now is not whether atheism will continue to grow, but how much it will shape the future of humanity.